There are some places you leave behind and never think about again. Then there are places that follow you, even after you have driven miles away. For me, it was a cheap apartment I rented shortly after graduating college, and a teddy bear that was never supposed to be watching me. I had just finished college and money was tight. I needed somewhere affordable, so I agreed to rent an apartment with a stranger. His name was Randall. We had never met before moving in together, and at first, there was nothing particularly alarming about him. He was quiet, kept mostly to himself, and spoke with a strong Spanish accent. The apartment seemed like a reasonable deal. My room was already furnished, which saved me money. There was a twin-sized bed pushed into the corner, a decent dresser, a closet, and a television stand. Nothing unusual, except for the stuffed animals. Several of them were arranged across the top of the dresser. Most were ordinary-looking toys, but one immediately caught my attention. A large teddy bear sitting upright and facing directly toward the bed. I asked Randall about them. He laughed loudly, almost as if the question amused him. "My room has them too," he said in his heavy accent. Then he told me I should leave them alone because they belonged to the landlord. Apparently, moving or damaging them would be disrespectful. It sounded strange, but not strange enough to argue about. That first day, I unpacked my clothes, arranged my things, connected my television, and tried to settle into my new home. I barely spoke to Randall after that. Later that night, I lay in bed watching television. The apartment was quiet except for the sound coming from my TV. Then, beneath the dialogue of the show, I heard something. A tiny electronic noise. It was brief, almost too brief to notice. I paused for a second and listened. Nothing. I eventually dismissed it as an ordinary house noise. Maybe an appliance. Maybe something electrical inside the wall. I turned my attention back to the television. At the time, I had no reason to suspect that the sound had anything to do with the teddy bear sitting across the room, facing my bed. And I certainly had no idea that the following night would make that tiny noise impossible to ignore. The next day, Randall was gone when I woke up. In fact, he stayed out for most of the day. I didn't know where he worked or exactly what his schedule was, so I assumed he was simply at his job. That night, I was in my room again when I heard the front door open. A moment later came the familiar sounds of Randall walking through the hallway. His footsteps moved toward his room, and then I heard his bedroom door close. The apartment became quiet again. Later, while I was changing into my pajamas, I heard it. That same tiny electronic sound. This time, my television wasn't playing in the background. There was nothing covering it up. I stopped moving. The sound seemed clearer now, some kind of small electronic device making a faint noise somewhere nearby. I looked around the room. The dresser, the closet, the television, the bed. Nothing seemed out of place. I considered getting up and searching, but the thought felt ridiculous. It was probably some harmless electronic component. Maybe something connected to the television or an appliance I hadn't noticed. So I climbed into bed and picked up the book I had been reading. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next day, I came home from work and encountered Randall. We exchanged a few words before he suddenly asked me what book I was reading. I didn't understand. What book? He clarified that he meant the book I had been reading in my room. I stared at him. How do you know what I was reading? Randall explained that he had gone into my room because he needed to retrieve something he had left there. While inside, he had noticed the book. I didn't like that explanation. I told him politely that I didn't want him entering my room again. There was just one problem. My bedroom door didn't have a lock. That meant there was nothing physically stopping Randall from entering whenever I wasn't home. That night, I picked up my book from underneath the bed. Then I froze. Something about Randall's explanation suddenly bothered me. If he had seen the book in my room, how had he seen it? The book had been under my bed. I hadn't left it sitting openly on the dresser or beside the television. I stood there staring at it. The apartment suddenly felt different. The silence seemed heavier. I looked around my room, trying to figure out what I had missed. Then my eyes landed on the teddy bear. It was still sitting on the dresser, but now it seemed perfectly positioned to look straight at me. And for the first time, I wondered whether that was exactly what it had been doing all along. I didn't feel like reading anymore. The book remained in my hand for a moment before I lowered it. I kept staring at the teddy bear. It was a large bear, the kind of harmless decoration most people would barely notice. But now that I was thinking about it, something about its position bothered me. It was facing the bed, not approximately, directly. I slowly got to my feet. The room was completely quiet. I walked toward the dresser. With every step, I became more aware of how ridiculous the situation seemed. I was standing in my own bedroom, frightened by a stuffed animal. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I needed to check. I reached the bear. Then I picked it up. Its fabric felt ordinary beneath my hands. There was nothing obviously unusual about it. I turned it slightly and examined its face. Then I looked into its eyes. My heart seemed to stop. One of the eye holes wasn't normal. Hidden inside it was a camera. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then everything connected at once. The strange electronic sound. Randall knowing what I had been doing in my bedroom. His explanation about entering my room. The lack of a lock. And that teddy bear, sitting in the same place, facing the bed. I threw the bear across the room. It hit the floor and landed in the corner. I barely looked at it. I immediately rushed toward Randall's bedroom door. I grabbed the handle and tried to open it. It wouldn't move. His door was locked. I knew Randall was inside. I began pounding on the door. Randall! Nothing. I hit it again, harder. Randall! Open the door. Still nothing. The silence coming from the other side was almost worse than an argument would have been. Then I noticed something beneath the door. A thin line of light had been visible along the floor. Now it disappeared. The room on the other side had gone dark. I stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the bottom of the door. Randall had been there. He had heard me. And instead of answering, he had apparently turned off the light. I didn't know what he intended to do next. I only knew I wasn't staying in that apartment long enough to find out. I backed away from his door and returned to my room. This time, there was no hesitation. I reached for my phone and called the landlord. When the landlord answered, I immediately began explaining what had happened. I told him about Randall entering my room. I told him about the book. Then I told him about the teddy bear. Most importantly, I told him that I had found a camera hidden inside one of its eyes. At that point, I wasn't interested in discussing whether I was overreacting. I wasn't interested in waiting until morning. I didn't want another conversation with Randall. I told the landlord I was leaving immediately. I also made it clear that I believed I had a valid reason to void the rental agreement. The landlord didn't come rushing over. He didn't appear at the apartment that night, and that somehow made everything feel even stranger. I returned to my room and started packing. I didn't carefully organize my belongings. I didn't worry about taking everything I had brought. My only concern was getting out. Clothes, a few personal things, whatever I could grab quickly. The apartment that had seemed like a practical solution only days earlier now felt like somewhere I needed to escape. Every second I spent inside made me more uncomfortable. The teddy bear was still in the corner where I had thrown it. I didn't go near it again. I carried my things outside, loaded them into my car, and left that same night. I didn't wait until daylight. I didn't wait for Randall to come out of his room. I didn't turn around and give the apartment one final look. I simply drove away. The entire experience had lasted only a few days, but those days had permanently changed the way I viewed the place I had been sleeping. The most disturbing part wasn't only the discovery of the camera. It was realizing how easily I might never have noticed it. The bear had been sitting in plain sight from the moment I moved in. I had even asked Randall about the stuffed animals. He had given me an explanation that sounded strange, but harmless enough. And every night, while I lay in bed, that bear had been facing me. I had been watching television, reading, changing clothes, sleeping, all while believing I was alone. The thought was enough to make my stomach turn. Eventually, I learned that the landlord never came after me for the money covering the few days I had stayed there. I left without paying the remainder, and I never returned. But physically leaving the apartment didn't mean the experience stayed behind. Something much smaller and much harder to escape followed me home. Years later, the memory remains unusually clear. I can still remember the layout of that bedroom, the twin-sized bed in the corner, the dresser, the television, the quiet apartment at night, and most of all, that teddy bear. At the time, I thought the stuffed animals were simply an odd decoration belonging to the landlord. Randall had laughed when I asked about them and told me to leave them alone. That explanation had been enough, until I discovered the camera. Looking back, the earlier details became much harder to dismiss. The electronic sound I had heard during those first nights. The strange question about the book. Randall's claim that he had entered my room to retrieve something. The fact that there was no lock on my bedroom door. And the camera hidden inside the eye of a stuffed bear positioned directly toward my bed. None of those things had seemed connected at first. Together, they formed something much more disturbing. I still don't know exactly what Randall intended to do with the camera. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know whether there were other cameras in the apartment. And I never found out what was happening behind his locked bedroom door when he refused to answer me. Those questions were never resolved. The landlord never came looking for me that night. There was no dramatic confrontation afterward. I simply left, and the apartment became a place I would never willingly see again. But the strangest consequence wasn't financial or legal. It was what happened to me afterward. I developed a fear of stuffed bears. Even now, if I see one sitting somewhere, I have an instinctive reaction. I don't like it facing me. I have to turn it around. Away from the bed. Away from the room. Away from me. It doesn't matter how harmless the bear looks. It doesn't matter if it's obviously just a child's toy sitting on a shelf. My mind still remembers what that first bear looked like. A harmless stuffed animal, positioned perfectly toward where I slept. And hidden behind that ordinary face was something I never expected to find. A camera. Sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what you see in the darkness. It's realizing that something may have been watching you while you believed you were completely alone.